Okay, welcome back. We are having a talk about TTN, Transient Tachypnea of the newborn. It's not going to be a very long one. We're not going in depth, but we want to kind of dip our toes a little bit into the water of this topic because it's a broad topic and is often misunderstood. And we want to offer some physiological insight and some foundational concepts about how we view this. What is our mindset around this? So, take it away.
So we spent some time talking about how a newborn makes its transition from its very low oxygen state to its higher oxygen state when it's born, and the various things it needs to have intact to make that be successful. And in our talking about it, we came to four basic agreements that we would say would always, be the essential understandings for this topic, right? And so I'll start with the first one because I think it's a really important thing that we often forget, and it tends to get lost in the shuffle of a lot of the fear around pediatric things, for lack of a better word. And the first thing, no matter where you look, do research on this topic, you'll find, well, there was a four-wheeler, I don't know if you can hear it. What you'll find is that the first thing that it says over and over again is that it is benign. It is a benign condition. It doesn't feel benign whenever you're watching it happen, because the baby often is breathing really quickly, and that's part of it, but breathing quickly appears to be working harder than it needs to be, but it's benign, which tells us that our job is supporting the baby to keep it that way, right? And making sure that it doesn't turn into that it isn't actually anything else, like, that there aren't any other symptoms that might lead us to think that it's no longer benign. So I think it's important to remember that it's benign, even though it's not always treated as such.
Right. And I think from that, we have to look at too, well, what would they do if we were in the hospital, if we did transport in?
Mhm.
And even though they would also perhaps diagnose transient tachypnea of the newborn as the issue, they have a minimum of a 3-day stay in most NICUs.
Mhm.
So they're not going to send you home to work it out, knowing it can be worked out. It will indeed work out. So we have to look at also, like, I'm not saying don't transport ever if you think you need to, but like, what's going to happen? Like, they're not just going to take a look and be like, oh, yeah, you're right. It's transient to get me of the newborn and send you home. They can't.
Right.
So I think that that is something to be noted when we're really looking about, like, well, how do we rule this out? And we'll talk about that, deeper when we go deeper into the subject. Um, and just knowing that this condition was originally called wet lung because it was often just, you know, basically a little bit of retained fluid was in the lungs and the baby's working that out. So, that's where the slap on the booty used to come from, right? Like we make the baby mad, we make it scream, it pushes the rest of that out. You may not see another episode.
Right. Right. Yeah, that it's self-resolving. That's really
Yeah.
the thing to remember. And in talking about, do you transport or not, and you're weighing that out in terms of informed choices, is it benign to separate the mother and baby and interfere with lactation, for example? So you have to kind of look at that. Is this something we can continue to support outside of an institution and maintain the baby's vitality and avoid the things that we know go along with any kind of institutional system, because it has to for them to work the way they do. It's just an observation, which often includes separation and the stresses that come to both the mother and the baby from that separation, both in terms of bonding, anxiety, lactation, all of those interferences. So something that's benign, perhaps, we have to look at the risks and benefits of where we support it very carefully. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that second point, then we came to four things that are true no matter what, right? Is it does always include tachycardia regardless of other symptoms. And even if you don't see it, you may not see that tachycardia because it can be episodic, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But it is there, which is
Mhm.
why it's called
And it may or may not be isolated. I've seen it
Mhm,
where it was the only symptom was the
mhm.
rapid breathing, continuous, or episodic. And I've also seen it where, especially with episodes where there was some cyanosis or blue discoloring of the skin of the face. And I always like to point out that it's very much the skin itself, not the lips or the mucous membranes in the mouth. So yeah, maybe the baby will look blue for a moment and then that goes away. There can be some mild symptoms, but the real key is that the baby can maintain its vitality and that there aren't symptoms of other more serious conditions like fever.
Right, because
It doesn't include fever.
the way you're viewing this baby is their little generator. Right.
Right,
So we're
right.
thinking,
Mhm,
and this is your own line, that they're a little
Mhm,
generator. It's not mine. But
mhm,
what does this generator need to continue going?
mhm,
Does it have what it needs to continue at where it's at this
mhm,
what could be a struggle for them? I've heard, you've told this story of a baby breathing at 100 breaths per minute.
mhm.
Do they have the stamina, the resources to continue that? This is the question. What is normal? Do we know normal? And
Right,
and what does this baby need?
right. And one of the key things that we can always go to, regardless of what the condition is that they're only going to have the ability to do that if they are feeding well, if they are replenishing the energy that they're burning up. And, a pearl that you can believe is that sick babies don't feed.
right.
So, if this is a benign condition, then this baby should be able to be feeding well, or at least feeding well enough to maintain the energy it needs until the condition can resolve. So, somewhere in this system of heart, lungs, brain, there's a glitch. That's basically the way I think of this. And we don't always know exactly where the glitch is, but somewhere there's in that circuit, something needs to finally mature and come together. And this fast breathing, TTN, can be a symptom of that glitch.
And this
Right.
is a glitch in the newborn transition from
Right,
placenta breathing to lung breathing. And your
right,
point three is that it always starts after the immediate newborn transition, this placenta to lung pressure, trigger hormonal dispersion.
right,
Um,
right,
and tell us more about that.
right. Yeah, so it's, you think we're all done. That's when
Yeah.
I've seen it. You think it's all done, and you're ready to go home even, or maybe you get
Mhm,
the call from the parents, so that it's not something that like the baby transitions successfully before you see these symptoms. It's not something that the baby did not transition and it continues on. That would be a whole different condition. So
right.
it doesn't start at birth. It starts after that transition has been made.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a real
exactly.
key.
I, I've it's usually like at that last minute of packing up your things,
Uh-huh,
right? Like that they'll go,
uh-huh,
"Hey, the baby just did this shuddery thing, and
mhm,
I saw a little blue on
mhm,
the face, and he was breathing really fast, but then it went away. Like
mhm,
what's going on with it? Oh, it went away." Right. That's usually it can be so quick. Sometimes that even, you miss it. Like it
mhm.
can be very episodic and quick, resolving very quickly. And those are usually the ones, especially that happen after precipitous bursts,
Right, right.
right? Which is the most common time that we
Mhm,
see it, I think. Not always
mhm,
true, but I've definitely had one that was the opposite. It was like this long period of stretching a cord that they were entangled in and all this. And so we saw it present probably about an hour and a half after the birth,
mhm.
after, snuggling in and had a few episodes. And um, I think after the long burst is when we may tend to believe it's something more pathological, right?
Right, Right.
So we have to be really careful to bring ourselves back into our bodies and find our feet and be like, okay, what did we witness? Like, did this baby transition in? How
Mhm,
is the heart rate? Like, we don't have these other things
mhm,
happening,
mhm,
which, in our deeper TTN talk, we talk about like the other possibilities of respiratory issues, but this one, or heart defects, as you
mhm,
have seen, Sarita. So I think
mhm,
that's important
mhm.
to
Yeah,
note.
my pattern as typically has been that it's been big babies who had who emerged quickly. Maybe, first stage maybe took longer, but once that they were out the door, they came rushing through, and it just didn't seem to give them enough time to go through both the clearing out of the lungs from the back and forth, as well as to do whatever they needed for their brains to click everything in and make everything work well. I think a lot of it probably happens way more than we know, just because it is episodic, it's over quick, and by the time maybe you get to the baby or you notice it, it gives a pretty good wail, and it's over. The one thing that it can be confused with is that because babies have such raw neurology, they do what's called Kussmaul breathing, which we've all seen that as parents, where they and then they hold their breath for a long time, and just about the time we think it's going to make us nuts and we go to check them, then they like they start messing with us right from the time they're born. And that really is their raw neurology. And so in some ways, that's part of why I think of TTN even as having some of that neurology as part of the problem. You combine that with lungs that maybe didn't get cleared out completely, and
Mhm.
the fact that they already breathe weird and make us crazy, some of them more than others. So many times I remember just putting my hand on making sure that, they were still breathing. That it makes it easy then for us to get, more worried than we need to, without understanding it's just newborn neurology, and most of the time it's going to work itself out.
Mhm.
Sick babies don't feed. If you're not going to remember anything else, and that's the one thing to remember: sick babies don't feed.
And we shouldn't be having a fever,
Right, and there shouldn't be a
like,
fever.
and grunting, and like these are the things, like,
Yeah.
you're going to see those things clustered together if there's a real problem, is likely what.
Mhm,
I loved what you said, though. It was like we often miss it because since we started having this talk, which we did, Alicia, you asked for us to clarify. So we had this mentoring session with you to deepen this conversation. I started thinking back of, oh yeah, that baby probably had TTN. We never talked about it. Oh yeah, that
mhm,
baby probably had TTN. We never really talked about it because we saw the recovery so quickly and that it was just these episodic things, and baby
mhm.
was nursing and none of these other factors were there. So we just never even diagnosed it.
Right, right. It's benign. We didn't need to
Mhm.
diagnose. It's a benign
We didn't need
condition.
to. Right. It's
That's the
fine.
thing. We've labeled something as a condition, but admitted it's benign at the same time, which is a little bit confusing.
Right.
Well, it's just this misunderstanding of physiology, just like
Yes,
so
yes,
many other things in pregnancy.
right. So many
Right.
things. And there's a number of reasons for that. And the thing that we can always count on is that, and if you read the books, it's going to say 3 days. In my experience, what that means is it's going to resolve on its own by the time the milk comes in. Right? I have always seen that to be true. And, the books will tell you 3 days. So,
Hmm.
I wasn't just imagining things. So yeah, it's benign. The heart, they always breathe fast. It's after they were born and you thought they were stable, and it's going to go away by the time the milk comes in. And I think that midwives traditionally have always known that, right? Like,
Yep.
Mm.
like it's something that was common enough that they they saw it and knew what to do.
And so part
Yeah.
of
Right.
your role as the person holding awareness, which of my tools, what of my skills, what of my knowledge would be helpful for this family to know or to keep this awareness around? Do we have the resources to make it to day 3 or day 5, whatever day for you in
Hmm.
particular that your milk comes in? Do we have the resources? And your question is, do I? Do I have this wisdom to impart? Do I know my tools well enough?
Mhm,
And that's another misunderstanding, that
mhm,
is a very good, deep conversation that I've enjoyed with you guys.
I love that too. I love that you brought this topic up because we do like, just kind of be like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. But when we have a set of new parents who have this baby here and they're like, why was he just breathing really fast? Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
there was blue around his face. And we just always think blue baby bad.
Mhm.
And, so that once we have that confidence and we have that knowledge and that wisdom, that we can be like, oh, this is really what's happening. And
Mhm.
your baby's feeding, your baby is, has the resources, you have the resources, everything is right here, and we can keep an eye.
And knowledge is
Mhm.
power. Knowledge is power for you to be able to educate them so that they can hold this knowledge to have the power to make
Right.
solid choices, because
Mhm.
no one's
Right.
ever going to care more for their baby than they are. Let's not get
And
that
you know
confused.
what else
Right.
I love about that is then they get to go tell that story to the people in their community so they go, oh, I didn't have to worry about that. Oh, maybe I didn't need to be in the NICU, or, like that ripple effect of family sharing their stories is
Yeah.
what I love most about that.
It's a
Mhm.
generational
Yeah.
wisdom. It's a community
Mhm.
wisdom. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
great. Okay. This was a great
Mhm.
talk. Thank you for
Learning
giving
to know what's
us,
normal.
yes. Thank you for giving us this glimpse into TTN. We'll
Mhm.
talk
Thank
to
Thanks
you.
y'all
for asking.
later.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks.